We now take a look at the updated onCreate and onResume methods of class AddressBook. Now the onCreate overridden activity method is mostly the same as it was back in lesson 10. The new features are at lines 74 and 76, where at line 74 we get a reference to the default Bluetooth adapter for the device, and we do that by calling the static getDefaultAdapter method of the Bluetooth adapter class. And we also create a handler here from the GUI thread that's going to enable us to display toasts back in the GUI thread from the other threads that execute from the AddressBook activity. Now, when the method onResume gets called, previously all it did was get the contacts so that they could be displayed in the activities list view. The new feature is this if statement at lines 86 through 93. And basically what we're going to do is check to see if the Bluetooth adapter is not enabled and whether the Boolean variable user allowed Bluetooth is true. Now, basically what's going to happen is if this condition is true, we're going to launch a built-in activity, the one that corresponds to Bluetooth adapter.action request enable. And when I launch the intent for this activity, what's going to happen is the Android operating system will display an activity that allows the user to determine whether or not Bluetooth should be enabled. So if it's not enabled, this activity will get displayed, and we're going to do that by calling start activity for result with our own constant enable Bluetooth. And of course, when the result is returned back to our app, the onActivityResult method will get called. We'll be able to see whether or not the request code was enable Bluetooth, and then we'll be able to check whether or not Bluetooth was enabled. And of course, if it's not enabled, then the app is not capable of receiving a contact from the same app running on another user's device. Now, the reason for the Boolean user allowed Bluetooth is that every time we display the activity for enabling Bluetooth, that pushes the address book activity into the background. And of course, when an activity comes back to the foreground, its onResume method gets called again. So if the user were to not give permission to enable Bluetooth, then without this Boolean here, what would happen is Bluetooth would still not be enabled, onResume would get called again, and once again we'd come into this if statement and redisplay the activity for getting permission to enable Bluetooth. So we needed a way to prevent that from happening, and the easiest way to do that is if the user responds that they're not going to allow Bluetooth to be enabled, we will receive that response, we will set user allowed Bluetooth to false, and that way the next time onResume gets called, it will skip this block of code and simply load up the contacts for the address book activity.